Yep.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Ufuk Gijferen. I'm the owner operator of Data Center Portal Limited. We've got Nabil Mahmood, Edward Van Leent, and Mark Acton joining us on this webinar. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'll start. I can start. This is Nabil Mahmood. I have been in the data center industry for about 20 plus years. Currently serve as the interim CIO at InStore. Sit on the board of directors for Rotura. I sit on the board of directors for a couple of other companies that are involved in developing AI, machine learning, as well as financial institutions that are publicly traded. Based out of the United States and currently reside in Hawaii.
Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mark Acton. Similarly, I've been involved in the data center industry for, gosh, certainly 20 years, probably 25 years in various capacities, both on the customer side and the supplier side. So I've seen both sides of the industry. Currently operating as an independent consultant. I am working for a number of different clients in different areas, actually quite different areas. So again, it gives me a fairly good perspective on the industry as a whole. So hopefully I can add some value to the conversation.
Excellent.
Great. Well, my name is Edward Van Leent. I'm the chairman and CEO for the EPI group of companies. Originally, we started in the UK and now we're headquartered in Singapore, where I'm based as well. Been in the industry, same as the other gentlemen, more than 20 years. Basically, as a company, we focus on the data center industry for the last 33 years that we are up and running, mainly looking at data center auditing and certification for design, as well as constructed facilities, as well as operations and governance, and providing a variety of data center courses helping the industry.
Excellent. Thank you, Edward.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably best to just let you guys know what we're going to be discussing today. The topic, of course, is confident decision making, the power of what if, and relevant data. What we're going to be covering are a number of points, mainly related to the intelligence in the market. So things around the lack of transparency in the market, if you like, the difficulties that we find or companies find in the search and find process, or acquiring relevant market research to enable effective business decisions. Also, where the lack of transparency and the lack of information is causing resistance in the growth of the data center market as a whole. And of course, what the importance is of verification. And while there are also a lot of existing standards and consultancies across the board, how do we harness those, what exists without having to reinvent the wheel, in terms of sort of the best practice design methods or build, and what goes on in the data center thereafter. So we have I've got a few questions around all of that, and to start off with, maybe sort of ask you, Mark, if you could just give me a bit of insight from your experience, what companies face generally when they're approaching the acquisition of relevant market research, whether that's those that are seeking to develop new facilities or invest or acquire new facilities, existing facilities rather. Could you probably highlight some of the challenges you think that exist today with that?
Yeah, sure. I think, there's probably a couple of questions in there. You mentioned market research and essentially site selection. I think to address site selection first, I think one of the challenges we face is that currently site selection really relies on sending experts to a site to evaluate that site to make sure it's an appropriate site for the particular business needs that a company requires. Those experts are expensive. You probably need, maybe more than one person. You may need an electrical engineering consultant. You may need a mechanical engineering consultant. You may need a surveyor as well. You know, again, those people are expensive, and to send them to one site is going to cost a lot of money. You know, they're on high daily rates. Secondly, you've then got travel expenses thrown in. And if you're looking at an estate which might cover, you know, multiple countries or even multiple continents, you know, you've got several days of those people's time. You've got travel expenses, you've got hotel expenses. So it becomes an incredibly expensive exercise. If, however, you could access information that you were confident in and was reliable, you could do a great deal of work as a desktop exercise without having to commit some very, very expensive resources to over a long period of time. And I think going back to your market research piece, I think that's another element. You know, if you're looking at market research, I think there's a question mark over a lot of the generic market research that's available out there based on, again, reliable and accurate data. And I think that's where we all fall down in this industry to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a good point. It's you know, very, very difficult. You know, I've certainly been victim to going out searching for suitable data centers for various customers. It's never been an easy task, hence why sort of data center portal exists.
Yeah, indeed.
And yeah, so I suppose, you know, what I've got there is, you know, obviously we've got the veracity of the information that's, you know, there to help, at least to some degree, shortlist data centers. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the data that comes from that verification that enable businesses to make sort of effective business decisions, you know, in investment opportunities or acquisition of existing facilities. So I suppose, you know, I think Edward, if possible, could you maybe sort of highlight your take on verification? I know EPI, you know, conduct audits on a global level. You know, what's your take on the, you know, the difference between, I guess, auditing a facility based on a specific standard against verifying a facility against their performance and their build, and as well as the non-performance related attributes such as the capacity or SLAs? Is that something you feel might be useful in the market?
Well, it definitely, you know, there are obviously a variety of guidelines and standards out there in the market against, you know, which data centers are, you know, doing their conformity checks. Sometimes it's done by themselves, which is obviously always a bit difficult because there is a certain colorful glass, so to speak, through which the data center operator owner looks at things themselves. If they do third-party verification, that could be done at different levels. Sometimes it's done by independent consultants, sometimes it's done by certification authorities. So how something is validated is relevant to who has actually done the validation. Is it done for the right scope? So as a customer, obviously you would like it to be done at you know, what you are looking at. So if you are, for example, looking at level 2, then a certification of level 3 holds no value for you potentially. So there's a variety of things that customers need to look at in terms of what has been done, what is the scope, who has actually performed it, is it still relevant, is it still actually accurate? Because an audit by all means is a reflection of that particular moment in time. But obviously 2 weeks later, or for all intent and purpose, an hour later, things could have been changed already. And that is something that you know, needs to be taken into account for an end user going into a site to make sure that the proper validation is done. And as to what Mark said, most of the time, even though some sites have certifications, sometimes customers still want to go in there, which obviously is a burden to the customer in terms of cost and time. But don't forget the operator themselves as well, because they end up very often being a tourist guide, so to speak, for a wide variety of prospective customers. And that is just a burden on the organization. You know, they spending getting their DC operations manager to be the tourist guide, so to speak, where in fact they should be focused on fixing things and making sure that everything runs.
Just to add to what Edward and Mark have said, I think you know, what and how we've been actually doing in the past is the way of the past. The way of the future needs to be different, whereby we need real-time information. We need accurate information and identifying the right resources, then location, and also, the information that's being shared as of today by these electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, architects, so on and so forth. There's a lot of personal touch to it. There's a lot of personal elements associated with it. There's a lot of preferences whereby it's not necessarily really driving a business case. It's more emotional and human elements, right? I think we need an infrastructure and a platform that can do that work for us, putting in perspective the cost optimization for all this research and validity of what tier level and or certifications do they have, and get the right individuals. The challenge that we have in the industry today really is that the guy that's making the decision, the guy that's the CEO of the company or the CFO or the CIO of the company, they are being told what the parties think they need to know, not what the business needs to have. So we need to get past that chasm of like the old way of doing business, that, hey, we need to go out, hire a bunch of consultants. And Mark, I mean, I've been a consultant. I mean, I totally support that. But I think the idea heretofore really is that we live in a culture and an environment where information now is information at our fingertips, and it's real data. And for an industry that supports all of that critical application and all these high buzzwords and exotic applications, we don't eat our own dog food. And I think we are at that chasm right now that we need to start looking at things differently.
It's very true. Yeah,
absolutely. I think Edward makes a good point as well, in that a lot of assessments today are based on a snapshot of the facility's performance, or the facilities build at that time, whereas in a couple of weeks' time, that facility, if not maintained, loses its ultimately its resilience. And I suppose that's one of the key reasons why data centers exist. And I think in creating something that enables us to regularly check the performance of a facility on a continual basis, which will also continue to collect the information or update it over a period of time, will also determine the quality of that particular operator and their ability to run and operate a data center. I think that's quite legitimate, Edward. So thank you for that.
And I think Edward actually made a great point about self-auditing as well, right? So it's generally a good practice to self-audit, see what you've got, but you can't self-certify. Like, oh my gosh, I'm a self-certified rated for infrastructure. Okay, well, I'm a certified king too. Okay.
Absolutely.
There needs to be a third body that does it. We've got and we've got to put in perspective what's happened in the last 9 to 10 months. The fact of the matter is that we're going to be more regulated as an industry on a go-forward basis. We're going to have to meet compliance standards, and we can't self-certify ourselves. There has to be a third party that comes in that does it.
Absolutely.
I think to the point as well, I think that we see more and more governments realize now that data centers are such a critical part of the overall infrastructure, right? It's not just the water supply or the electrical supply anymore. It's the internet and the connectivity as a whole in a country. And I think that drives regulation probably more and more from that level, that they say this is just like water supply. It needs to be there. It needs to be always on. And that is where you see regulations coming in more and more.
Absolutely. And I think the current crisis has just increased dependency on digital infrastructure generally. And I think it's highlighted the need to do this properly. The need was always there. It's just that we've had a spotlight shone on us as an industry. And so we do need to do a far better job. To Nabil's point, we need to use data we have available and make sure it's accurate. And the challenge is sometimes the accuracy, or the, dare I say, the self-certification, which would suggest a level of inaccuracy possibly.
Do you think that that's something that's still profound now, where operators make claims that they've built facilities to a certain, availability class or tier level or level, and quite frankly haven't?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll see it in there are some that do it, there are some that clearly don't, and do not make false claims. But certainly, if you look through enough sites, enough marketing material, you'll see all sorts of claims that really cannot be substantiated. And it doesn't really matter what they're referencing in terms of which standard or what particular thing they're quoting. The fact is there's no evidence for the statements that are being made. And I think that's one of the beauties of a verification process. It's not recertifying anything. It's not going in and saying, you are at a certain standard. What it's doing is checking the veracity of the statements that are being made.
Absolutely.
And the whole point of that is to give people more confidence in the data they're looking at and more confidence in the industry itself.
On the same side of that, if the data center operator also has built their facility or upgraded their existing facilities to a certain standard, also to a certain quality, then of course, having the ability for a third party to verify that and say, actually, you know what, you are right. In fact, in some cases, it might be, well, actually, you've probably built your facility better than the standards that are out there. So,
it may be that there are several applicable standards. There's obviously overlap between standards, and so I think it will be wrong for engineers who have a particular experience in one particular area to say, this is good because it adheres to this particular standard that I'm familiar with. Well, that isn't necessarily true in the sense that there are other possibly equally applicable standards. And I think what we need to do is say, tick several boxes, not just one box, and sort of by no means rate those, but certain elements will be more applicable to certain markets potentially. And we should just highlight all the relevant ticks in boxes and say, this is what's available, this is what it represents, and there is a confirmation that there is actually a document in place which offers a certification to this level. Rather than just someone saying, yes, I'm just tier 3+, which doesn't even exist in anybody's book. Which you see on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
Sorry,
that makes a good point, right? It's true, right, that a lot of people make various claims, and sometimes intentional. It's the marketing fluff to brush up the data center beyond its capabilities potentially. Sometimes it's really omittance of an operator. They got certified, a couple of years ago. They put it on the wall, never maintained it, and for a customer trying to find a data center, it's a really challenging job. You go through the traditional ways of finding websites of the operator themselves, digging through all the information, which might be marketing fluff, it might be true information. As Mark alluded to, some say we are certified, or they say we build towards standard XYZ. Nobody has validated it. So the need for a central point, is so important. It's kind of like it might sound like a silly command, but like the trip advisor of data centers, so to speak. There's a central point where everybody can come, have validated information, not the marketing fluff. So if somebody makes a marketing statement, you can be confident that somebody's actually checked that information, that is the right scope, that there is the expiration date that is still there, and if it's not there, then it's gone. And that is what is missing in the industry, willingly and not willingly sometimes. There is a lot of things happening in the market that confuses customers and really could have an impact. In this industry, you can't do trial by error. You can't say, let's try our luck, go in one data center, move in 100 racks, and if it didn't work well, too bad, so sad, we move it to another data center the next year. Typically, it's long-term contracts, and you have to get it right pretty much, in the first time. And that is where validated information is so critical for end users.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You make a good point earlier about the TripAdvisor scenario where the central platform could be perceived as such. But, I'd like to think that, the data center portal platform is a combination of, let's say, a credit report and a TripAdvisor and possibly somewhat of a moneysupermarket.com, if you like. So it's, a reference to the three. We've got the ability to compare facilities or compare services, and going to a bit of a deeper dig into the facilities infrastructure, which I found to be quite a difficult task when actually doing that myself. Getting that information, unless you've got a potential customer to introduce to an operator, the operators are kind of reluctant to share information about their facility infrastructure. Do you find that that's still the case? And, you know, does there need to be a commercial objective before the operator is willing to divulge information about their facility? Have they got something to hide? And that's why they don't do it. Is it a security issue? You know, what are the kind of what are the reasons you guys all think that, you know, the data center operators can be secret squirrels, I suppose, at times? What's your perception on that?
There are many reasons for it, right? Sometimes it's the hiding something factor. A lot of it is also down to competition. You know, it's very funny. We still come into sites where we do, for example, an audit, and people are worried about sharing a single line diagram, as if there's such a big secret about a single line diagram. We have an A and a B feed. You know, there's really, I can draw it on a napkin in 5 minutes, right? So, but they still kind of like, oh, we want you to sign an NDA because this is such a secret sauce. So, and I think for a data center, I think there are two parts to it, right? You know, mention again about your TripAdvisor command. There are two parts to it, right? We have the advertising side, so to speak, the data center operators that like to show themselves in a good light. But it will be very valuable to actually talk to their customers as well and say, what is their experience? Did they have any unexpected downtime that, you know, obviously was not shared with the world because of NDAs, etc.? How happy are they? It's not about the physical building and all the pipework and cabling inside, but it's also the user experience. How flexible are they? Are they easy to do business with? Have they commercially maybe advantages? So there are many aspects, not only the physical. And when we talk about uptime in terms of availability level, so to speak, don't forget that the way a data center is operated has a massive impact. You know, you can have the best tier 4, rated 4 type of architecture, but if you have a number of people working in there that don't really know what they're doing, or the processes are not well aligned with your business objectives, then everything still falls apart. And the same with a hotel. You can build a fantastic hotel, and I think all of us on the team have traveled the world a bit. And sometimes you go to a hotel and it is so lovely when they cut the ribbon, and 5 years later you come in and it's the biggest dump and you never want to go back anymore. Right? And I think the same is with data centers as well. That it's a continuous attention, and sometimes customer feedback, in an open shared forum will give you that feedback. Say, hey, it was great 5 years ago, but it's not so great anymore today.
Yeah. And I think we do hide behind the secrecy in data centers a little bit. You know, we talk about the sort of the criticality of data centers, which is fair enough, but I think we have probably an unhealthy use of this sort of confidence and secrecy thing. I think, you know, it would be easy, I think, to share more information if we were willing to as an industry, but we are a little bit secretive, which doesn't help anybody, let's face it. So, you know, more access to more information that is more accurate, I think, would be beneficial for everybody, including the operators themselves, because the playing field would be more level. You know, it would be far easier to compare sites, and the good sites will do well. The less good sites may suffer, but that may not always be a bad thing.
Yeah, I think all you guys make great points. I think the one that really sticks out with me is what Edward said, that it can't be a life certification. There's constant improvement. Our industry is changing on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah.
You need to go back and visit it on a regular basis. To answer your question of, I think one of the challenges, besides what Edward and Mark have mentioned, is the fact that there's this fear factor that we've got in the industry, and the lack of confidence, whereby we don't want to share that information because somebody might question the fact that we say that we are a rated 4 environment, but in reality we are a rated 2 environment. So we don't want to get information out to the public. And secondly, it's potentially the people in those places as well, that they don't want to share that information since it's the secret sauce for them, and it's a career limiting move in a lot of cases. We've seen that in a lot of different industries, that people keep their secrets to themselves. And the industry, besides it just changing itself, the global economy, the environment has totally changed, and the way we do business is starting to change as well, where it's important for us to get better. We need to share information so we can build on each other's successes and understand from each other's failures and build an environment that's more sustainable. for instance, we are seeing that with 5G, we are seeing that with edge computing. People are starting to be a little bit more open about how they're designing building these environments and what the go forward strategy is. And I think, in general, the problem that we have in industry is that we are not that old. We've got 4 decades, literally only 4 decades of experience and education behind us when you compare us with other industries globally. So we are learning as we're growing, and hopefully, on the positive note, I think, what we are trying to accomplish here before really is to educate people, to help them understand what the future is going to be like, and the importance of sharing information, the importance of actually good data, not just data, but good data that's valuable. And I also believe that if we are able to accomplish this in a way and shape and form that's easily understandable between the silos that we currently have in the space, from a very technical, electrical, mechanical, architectural guy, operation guy, to somebody that has no bloody idea what a bit or a byte means, but he's the guy that's spending the money, we will see a lot more capital being infused in this industry very quickly, because they can actually now develop and look at metrics that we have not looked at for the last 4 decades.
And I think actually, to that point, Nabil, I think customers are getting smarter. They're expecting more. They're expecting more backup or more supporting evidence for some of the claims that are being made. And I think in the past, people have got away with not necessarily supplying a lot of that supporting evidence. Now it's expected. So where does it come from?
It goes beyond the SMEs.
I would give a simple example. I mean, I'm not the more hands-on typical mechanical guy. So if I was to go get an engine oil change in my car, probably might walk out with a new engine in the car. And I think to simplify this, for people that are running these critical environments, we need good, valuable information and good, accurate data.
Yeah, 100% agree.
I think that's a thing in the industry as well, where we tend to talk in speed and feeds and try to impress people with all kind of terminology. And for a business manager, it's all about availability and speed and feeds doesn't matter, right? They want to know, is the environment reliable? Is it up and running? Can I have a secure environment? Because ultimately, data centers, we are in the trust business, right? People trust their environment to us, and we need to be able to earn that trust and maintain that trust, right? And by hiding behind all kind of terminology and say, well, we have 5 feet and the other guy has only 4 feet, to me as a business manager is meaningless. I just want to make sure that my IT keeps running at the speed that I want, that it's secure, and that you maintain it well, like you would maintain your own baby, so to speak.
It comes down to confidence, doesn't it? Really, confidence and trust.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah, and I would not leave education behind, guys.
We're taking that for granted, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, just to steer it towards more the research aspect of the topics here is, bringing that information and harnessing it, bringing it into one sort of central platform, if you like, or central database. What I'd like to understand, probably maybe direct this question to Mark, is with what's already out there, with research houses or brokerage firms that are already out there, how have they gone about collecting the information that currently exists or that's presented today, and if possible, how effective do you think that's been in the past?
So I think what you'll find so far is that a lot of the work that's been done has been done on a very ad hoc basis. So it's been designed to satisfy a particular demand or question, and typically it's focused on either specific markets or specific sectors. There is very, very little, if any, accurate data about our sector in general. Whether you're talking even in an individual country, but certainly when you're talking globally. And I literally, and I'm not making this up, we had a question this morning, how many data centers do we think there are in the world? And I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea. That's even without getting to the discussion of what is a data center, because we could be here all day with that one. But how many data centers are there in the UK? How many data centers are in the US? We don't know. We have no idea. And then we start talking about global energy consumption, and there are governments that are looking to legislate. There are all sorts of potential regulations coming in, and yet these are being based on zero data. Realistically, they are guesses at best in many cases. So the idea that we have effective market research and the idea that we have realistic data is just nonsensical. So anything that we can do to get more accurate data about our sector, accurate and ideally verified data, something that's actually been checked, the more benefit we're going to bring to this sector and to government and to individual people looking for new data centers and to operators and owners and people who are considering building in a particular region. It's remarkable, and going back to Nabil's point, it's probably not unexpected in the sense that we are a very young industry, but it is remarkable how many decisions are being made on very, very, very poor data. It's actually quite shocking. I think in any other industry, you'd probably be fired for even considering making a decision on the basis of the data that's available. So yeah, it's absolutely essential and totally lacking at the moment. I think that probably answers the point.
Absolutely. I think Nabil, that links to what Nabil said earlier. I think this is all about education. And of course, finding that knowledge and applying it in an appropriate manner. I've always heard the term, knowledge is power. I don't believe that. I believe finding the right application for knowledge is power, or even better, finding an appropriate application for it, and sharing that to the masses is power for us all. But indeed, I think the key thing to take away from this is that we are still in our infancy as a sector. And that I think we're at a point now where we should have collected, or we should have as much insight as we have in other sectors or industries, and I think we're a few years behind, obviously.
Definitely.
I would say it's never too late. I think where we are at right now and what's going on in the world, this is the data rush, and the opportunity is still there, we can still do it right. Being in the United States, or like looking at the markets in the UK and Europe, when you start looking at emerging markets, they're learning from us. They're doing it better than us, and I think we need to actually step back and revisit how they're doing it. And just imagine the possibilities, really. I mean, with this gold rush and what's the fact that everything is connected. I mean, the fact that I counted up 57 connected devices in the home is absurd, and means that there is more data. And if we've got accurate information for the data center industry, what it means is that we're going to be able to scale up very quickly if we have that accurate data. If we don't, we're making assumptions and we're making wrong business decisions. We're putting environments and infrastructure in places that we shouldn't be in. There's no reason for us to go subsea when we can fix what we've got on land.
Absolutely.
It does require a lot of openness from data center operators, and the belief that working together is better than working on their own island. And I think by sharing data, as much as what you see now between one continent learning from another continent, that can happen between continent to continent, can happen within a country as well. And what we have seen is that sometimes just bringing data center operator owners together in one room and asking them questions about how do you conduct this or how do you do that, everybody's kind of quickly looking at the glass and kind of like, I'm not here, I'm not going to answer that, right? And I think that is something that the industry needs to learn to say, sharing makes everybody better ultimately, right? And and that is, I think, the goal of the industry. And I think with a platform where every information, and again to Mark's point as well, the information is there. Some people are not sharing it, even classifications, to Mark's point as well. Somebody asked me, how many big data centers are there? You have to define big. People say a medium-sized data center. Well, my definition of medium-sized, might be completely different than somebody else, right? If I've been running around in 100 megawatt data centers, to me that's just an average data center, right? But for somebody who has done normally 100, 200 kilowatt data center in-house, that is, a mind-boggling data. And all these things just need, and if you have it in a platform where I could say, I'm looking for a data center, it must support X amount of megawatt, X amount of floor space. There is no secret about that. There is no secret about locations. Data centers say, I'm not going to put the address of our data center on our website. Why? Because we are afraid. Well, I can call you now and tell you that I have the opportunity to have 100 racks in your data center. Can I visit them? They give me the phone number and the address. So it's all this false secrecy that people have.
So
Right?
true.
So
Yeah, so true. That was a point I was making
actually,
earlier. It's
exactly,
false secrecy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is. So I think that one of the moves need to be like having a collaborative platform where people can share honest data, which is validated again, to take out the marketing fluff. I think that helps the industry and particularly the end users, because without end users, data centers don't exist either, right? So they need to gain the trust, and you need to be open and transparent, and it only helps to make everybody better.
100%.
Yeah, it takes on more of a reactive approach to, tenancy within a facility, or even going into the cloud. You need to, dig deeper than, requesting from the operators the SLAs. The SLAs are insurance. The SLAs are, a reactive approach. That's great. If something happens, if something goes wrong, we can rely upon those SLAs. Fine. But, if you've got a business that needs to operate, continuously, and you've not checked the infrastructure, you've gone in there purely on the basis of, looking at these lists of SLAs that are provided, and you've not gone further, that verification, actually physically going there and checking the facility and seeing it work, seeing it tested, or seeing at least the testing certificates. I think that's where you can take a lot of the work away from the people, or at least to a certain degree. You look at 20 data centers and you have to go and visit them all. It's probably better to shortlist a few of them and streamline the process in that respect by, having something that you can rely upon remotely, and say, here we are, we've got 5 data centers as opposed to 20. Let's check these out, and you've just saved yourself, crap load of money.
And there's a lot of value for the operators as well, right? As I said, a lot of data center operation managers, they become tourist guide because they get 10, 15 customers per month, and nobody's going to put their racks in, right? So for an operator owner to put their data in a central location, that already saves them a lot of time themselves as well, by being open what they have, because then customers who see the business fit will automatically be more sincere and more, because sometimes data center operators get called by somebody, a potential customer, and they say, can I see your data center? I want to have more information. Well, we can't share it. That's the secrecy again. And then they come to the data center and they find out by going through the door that this is not the type of data center they're looking for. Well, if you would have known that in advance, right? You're not going to a restaurant not knowing what food is in the restaurant, right? If they say, well, it's a secret restaurant with secret menu, then you probably wouldn't go there. Right, and with data centers, the same thing. If I have a specific purpose, I want to know that you can support 10 kilowatt per rack, and I know you must have at least 100 rack space available for me. If I have all that information in a central platform, it helps me as a customer, but it also helps the operator. And I think that is what they need to realize, that they can save a lot of money and a lot of time and valuable resources as well.
I think there's a couple of things I'd add to that. I mean, to your point, Edward, if the owner operators have access to the information as well, they can potentially spot gaps in the market that they can actually start to fill. If there are no sites in a particular region capable of supporting 10 kilowatts of rack, for instance, well, that becomes a business opportunity, doesn't it, that they can actually take advantage of. And the situation even grows. I mean, let's consider the edge. I mean, the edge is not just things in lampposts. Obviously, it's actually some quite large data centers in locations driven by data sovereignty, for instance. If you're looking at deploying, let's say, into 100 edge sites, however you define edge, then how on earth do you do that with individual peoples and expensive resources? Well, the only way you can start making decision around deployments of that sort of scale and that sort of geographic diversity is having a tool to give you that information to do that. There is probably no other way of doing that quickly.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I want to thank you all for your time today. I think we've come to a close with the time, or the allocated time that we've got. Time is infinite. So we've only got an allocated amount of time to discuss this. But thank you again, Nabil, Edward, Mark. I appreciate your time, and thanks again. But I think maybe to summarize, what I'd like to say is that, the key take from this is obviously, educating the market, sharing knowledge, acquiring knowledge, and spreading it out to the masses, to help the sector grow, to help the world grow as a whole, and probably instill a bit of altruism in people's characters or companies' philosophies as well, in order to help everybody grow their own businesses as well in the process. So again, thanks a lot, guys, for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
Thank you.
yeah,
And I'm sure if there are any additional questions, you can email them in, and I'm sure either myself or Edward or Bill will be happy to sort of answer questions if there are anything that comes out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Contact details provided, I imagine. Super.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thanks again, guys.